All right. Hello and welcome everybody to the Thought Leadership Podcast and Live Show, episode 33. And today we have a very, very special guest, Shawna Gilbert, Vice President of Remax Global team with 110 countries. She's an amazing superwoman, and I'll introduce her a bit more in details. But I just want to say for everyone listening, if you're listening or if you're watching, if you are in leadership position, if you want to get into the leadership position, if you want to really be bold in your dreams, step up into your powers, really show the world what you're capable of, this is the episode for you. This is the place to be and listen. So make sure to listen in and sit down, take everything away, anything that you're doing right now, tune in, take this time for yourself. If you want to grow your leadership, this is the moment to listen and join and really soak it all in. Thank you, Shawna, for being here with me.
Thank you. What an honor to be asked to be on your podcast. So I'm delighted and looking forward to having this conversation today.
Thank you, Shawna. It's such a pleasure. So I'm just going to give a bit of a background about you. For the ones who don't know Shawna, she's the Vice President of Remax Global Development Team, which currently serves over 110 countries and around the globe. And Shawna and her team are responsible for Remax global expansion. So she works with 70,000 sales associates, 6 internal team members, nearly 5 offices, and 110 countries and territories. So there's a lot of amazing things that Shawna is creating in this world. So leadership and all these things that has around to do with leadership is really, I would say, Shawna, you're a role model for many women and men when it comes to getting to impact so many lives in the daily things that you do. So if we could just go back, and I would love to start with the question about, have you always knew that you'll work with leadership? When you were a child, when you were growing up, when you were a teenager, did you already know that you want to go into leadership position?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because I knew it was tied with being public and presentations. And so, no, it was never a dream or a thought. But, and thank you. It's so interesting hearing somebody talk about you, right? And I can find myself sitting here going, I don't know how to even take in everything that she's saying, that currently do, or who I am, and how to have my face, to everybody, because you're listening to yourself. And anyway, but no, I did not think I'd be in this role. So it's been a journey for sure.
Amazing. And that's the amazing part about you. When I got to meet you first time about 2 years ago, is that, vulnerability and authenticity that you bring to this conversation. Just starting right now saying, wow, hearing about this about myself. And it's true. It's something that is hard to hear. It has a lot to do with, wow, is that me? Someone is presenting you, but that is all of you. And that, you created all this, and all of this is really you. So for sure, somehow it's hard to kind of put that together sometimes, because as you also mentioned to me, you are mother of 3 children, 2 children, you have 2 dogs, you have a team. There's so many roles that you play somehow, right?
Right. Different hats.
Yeah.
Which hat am I wearing right at this moment? Because I tell you, during the day, it changes dramatically.
Yes.
Multiple times.
Yes. Well, today, so the hat we want to bring to this conversation is the Shawna hat, you completely in all conversation, the full you. So let's go back a bit to when you said that you didn't really want to go into leadership position because you were, with the presentation, all that kind of stuff. Do you remember the pivotal moment when you said, wait, maybe I should go into this? Do you remember what happened?
I do. I had a baby, and my boss and my mentor left. That was the pivotal moment. I mean, to be honest, I knew it was somewhere along the track that I would be, leading the team. I mean, I do believe we all lead in many different ways, whether it's your household, whether it's, leading your children. But the moment of leading people, and leading people is very different than anything that you could ever do. But the pivotal moment of this position specifically, which is, the cornerstone of my leadership, of my career, I had a 6-week-old baby, and my boss was leaving the company, and I felt I would someday transform into that role. But being in the company for 7 years, I didn't think it was at that moment. And the big part of that story is I didn't know, I thought that maybe it would be, they would nominate somebody or promote somebody into that role just by knowing what you've done and what you've brought to the company. But it wasn't that. It was, if you want to be the vice president of global development, you need to apply for it. So 6-week-old baby, 3-year-old baby, or 3-year-old, not so baby. And I had to make the active decision that this is something that I could do, I wanted to do, I could balance it with everything else that I had going on, that, I could get my brain cells together and put together a marketing plan and a resume and a business plan for people who I felt already knew me, so that I could attempt to take this on. And I promise you, I thought that it surprised me when I got it. I thought that it was already planned for somebody, and this was one of those formalities, that companies sometimes put in. And it shocked me when they said it was me. And that was the second time in my career at Remax specifically that I went, oh my gosh, now I have to do everything that I said I could do, right? Because when you're in an interview and you're putting together your resume, you're saying all the things that you have done and can do, and now it comes to light, and you actually have to do it. And even more so than that, I was on a team of people who I now had to go from peer to manager, and people who also applied for the position, and people who have been there 2 to 3 times as long as I. So how do I structure myself to be able to lead people, not be an imposter, the imposter syndrome is something I've lived through many times, but this was one of those moments where I had to really come into myself, find the confidence, find all the traits, that I already naturally had as a leader, and really get my stride, not follow in somebody else's footsteps, but in turn, really kind of blaze my own trail and figure out what that looks like.
Yeah, amazing. And when you mentioned something that you knew that day might come at some moment, but not when. And many times many times we think that we are not ready, and then that opportunity come our way, and we have to choose, like say, I'm going for it, because there's never really, I think, in life a moment when, you're just like completely ready and it just comes at the right moment and everything just works out. Like, it's almost like we are tested to see, like, do you really want it, So it sounds like it was an important question to ask yourself. Well, I mean, you were saying you had a newborn child, you had thought about this, but you didn't have, that process of going through it. How does that really look like to be the vice president of, and it's quite a big responsibility. So did you have any advisors? Did you have any mentors? Did you have any support to make that decision? Or are you more someone that makes your decision yourself? How does it look like when you decide to go on something so important?
A couple different angles on that. I knew I had the support of some of the team. I knew that we wanted to keep it internal. We wanted to keep our team together and, our culture and the way that we do things. And so, I knew they wanted one of us, whether it was me or one of the others. So I knew they were leading me to part of it. My husband and I had the conversation of, are we going to be able to do this? Are we going to be able to balance? He was part of, it. And once I got kind of past that, the third part was, everybody has their tribe. Everybody has their circle of people who you go to when you really have those decisions. The ones, I heard something that makes it all come together in a very easy way. And that is sorting your mail. Right? You end up, if you have 100 different opinions and different thoughts on something, whether it's, should I go for this role? I may have 100 different people telling me, yes, no, are you crazy? Absolutely not. Why would you even go there? As you piece through your mail and you figure out, you have 40 pieces that are just absolute junk mail because you don't know who they are and you don't really understand what they're even saying. And then, you know, as you kind of piece through it, and people, I really look at my mail in terms of who do I trust, who would tell me the truth. And to be honest, Daria, it ends up being like 3 to 4 different people in your life that you know, no matter what they say, you know, no matter what mail they're sending you, you're going to read it. And those are the things you're going to actually take in.
Yes.
And that's totally what I had, is I have a circle of people who I can honestly say, gosh, you know, when I'm not confident, they are the ones that are confident for me, and the ones who, you know, help build me up and let me see it for, you know, everything that I can see, and see myself for things that you don't see yourself as well.
Absolutely. And for the ones listening, watching, those 3, 4, 5 people, you might have heard of the 5 people who surround yourself that are the most, you know, you are the average of the 5 people that surround yourself with. And for me, the same thing. Every time I did something that, you know, took me out of my comfort zone, or I was public speaker, you know, I started public speaking early. I moved to 4 different countries. I started off my business in 4 different countries, and, you know, just jumped into the unknown, just trusting myself. But I could not have done it without the people I have around me. And as you mentioned, it's the people that you can trust. And there's also the people who can tell you when you're up to something and they're like, wait a second, where are you going with this? And I think it's so important, because it's so easy to get into a position where, you know, if you're leadership position, there's going to be people pleasers around you that want, you know, want you to, it's not completely objective opinions, but having those people who are very objective and saying like, this is really what I think, it's so crucial as you grow in your career. Would you not say that?
Oh, I would absolutely say that. And you know what? I love when people tell me how great, you know, and how great it was. I really ask a second question and say, well, was it? Okay, so thank you, but where can I improve? Because they will always tell you do great. They're your fans. They're the ones, the smiling faces when you're looking out doing a public presentation. But, and I want to hear that, but more so I want to hear, you could have had more eye contact, or, you know, you could have told this type of story and we could have connected better. The best feedback I got was, you know, was negative feedback, you know, and it was that feedback that helps you to grow and helps you to be your absolute best. And when you have the 3, 4, 5 people who you totally trust telling you, you know, it's always coming from a good place. And to me, they want me to be the best that I can possibly be in whatever I'm doing. And so I'm going to really take that to heart and try to improve upon it. And my previous boss was very, very good at, you know, I'd say, so how did I do? And he'd say, well, not your best. And it was like, shoot, you know, you want to hear like knocked it out of the park. But instead it was, you know, not your best. Here's why, you know, and some of the feedback, you know, I've gotten about myself is, Shawna, you know a lot, but you throw it all at me in a way that I can't consume it. And so you really need to walk into it with the thoughts that you want to deliver. And that way you're clear, you're concise, your audience knows exactly why you're there and why you're able to deliver that. And to me, some of those very easy lessons, you know, have followed me through. And I think about them every time I go to present, every time I go to put together a PowerPoint, all of it. You know, I have to think of the basics.
Absolutely. And you mentioned here that public speaking has been something very important for you to develop, as you know, you travel to all these countries and there's so much presentation, public speaking involved in your role. Can you share a bit about how your experience has been with public speaking and when you started off and now?
Absolutely. And that even, I didn't do very much public speaking before RE/MAX because, you know, just like everybody else, one of the top fears is standing in front of a crowd and passing your knowledge, you know, and something at the time I didn't realize, well, you're passing the knowledge on something that you should know about, you know, relax. It's not, you know, something that you don't. But when I first applied for RE/MAX, one of the big job description recommendations was that you had to do high scale public speaking. And even though I was pretty limited before then, I had maybe done a couple nonprofit events and, you know, a handful of things in school, but you know, I went for it and I said, well, not comfortable, who is, right? Who's going to say totally, totally good at that? But I went for it and I thought, I'm going to learn it. I'm going to do it because that is so important. Any leadership position that you have, whether it is doing a presentation in front of your direct team, it's the same skill. It's the same skill set that you need in doing a presentation in front of 6,000 people. When I first became vice president, 3 months after, they said, hey, Shawna, guess what? You are going to be on the opening general session stage in Vegas in front of 6,000 people. Cool thing is you get to be with Brian Buffini, but you know, you're the person with global, and we want you to talk about global and why it matters. And the pit in my stomach, you know, it just felt like I had just gotten kicked by a horse. And I thought, oh my gosh, you know, I'm so grateful, you know, I'm so grateful that they thought of me, and this is what you want. This is what everybody would want, but holy cow, how am I going to do this? And, you know, in front of 6,000 of my peers, you know, they're going to be judging me. They're going to look, you know, got to make sure the shoes are great. What am I going to wear? You know, all those things that you go through. But it was a pivotal moment. And from that, presentations around the world, you know, doing translation. Sometimes you have to do it where you have simultaneous translation. You have to be conscious of how fast you talk. Sometimes you have not simultaneous. So you're saying a couple sentences and then you're waiting. And then, you know, so there's a lot of skills that you have to do, especially when you're working with audiences that may not speak English, and audiences that you're teaching something to. There's a delivery. There's a way that you have to, you know, educate yourself constantly on how to deliver in public speaking. So anybody who's considering being a leader, get into Toastmasters, start doing, you know, little tiny presentations in front of people you trust, because it's very important. And you really can't be an impactful leader unless you are able to deliver yourself in front of people.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned as well, if you are a speaker and you want to develop yourself, there are so many ways of develop yourself, because there's a difference between speaking to an audience of 50 people or 6,000, or speaking to an audience that is, you know, native English speaker or from another country, because you have to adapt culturally. You have to adapt to the situation, as if you're working with translation, like you mentioned, or presentation in the team. There's so many ways, and don't make this feel like, oh my God, there's so many ways I will not start. So public speaking is one of the most important skills to have in leadership, because you're always speaking. You're always presenting your brand. Either it's for someone else's brand or for your own brand, it doesn't matter. It's an important skill to have. And as Shawna said, you start with the first step. It can be Toastmasters. It can be taking a course, joining a team, just getting online and starting your own podcast. Can be as easy as that. Today, it's not so hard today as it might have been for a couple of years ago to have an opportunity to have a stage. Nowadays, we all have a stage. It's up to us to take that stage and share our message, because there might be one person listening to you and feel, oh my God, that really resonated with me. Or, oh my God, that can really change my life. Or there is this small advice, it just hit me, and there's going to be a difference in my life. So it's so important that we understand the opportunity of impacting other people's lives with public speaking. And I mean, Shawna, it's amazing that you mentioned, like yourself, you had this moment when you were studying that 3 months into the position, 6,000 people, and thinking, oh my God, you know? So there's always going to be it sounds like in your story that there's always some new lessons to learn, you know? There's almost like this gamification of, okay, now I learned this skill, now I have to learn to do this skill. And is that something that you would say is important to embody in your positioning, in also kind of have as a personality, more philosophy in life when you go through leadership, to always be open to try out new things and learn new skills? Has this been important for your own leadership?
Oh, 100%, you know, and while you're talking, a couple quotes came to mind, you know, one is never be satisfied, and two is always be learning, right? Yes. I've done teleprompter work, which is a whole nother set of public speaking, right? Because you're public speaking, but you're in front of a single camera delivering to however many people are going to be watching. And even just as last week, teleprompting is still it's one of those skills. And I was Googling before I went, what do I do with my hands during, if the shot has my body, what do I do with my hands? Yeah. And, it is something that I want to go in ready. I don't want to just stand in front of the teleprompter and, the whole production crew. And I want to at least look like I've attempted to know what I'm doing and not just walk in and anticipate that they're going to teach me. And so, knowing that, we just talked about like 3 or 4 different facets of public speaking. Zoom has been one of those, how are you effective in front of a camera when you're not physically in front? Because I think a lot of us feel, if you and I were in Majorca together, we would be able to have an amazing conversation. And it's one of those, how do I carry that skill and make it still feel comfortable and like you and I are together when there's a camera and when there's people looking? And, Zoom has made it to where, we're looking at ourselves while we're having this conversation. And while you do that, you're self-criticizing, how you look, is my lipstick too bright? What's behind me? And I think everybody kind of gets caught up in some of that you can't act natural when you're on a camera, and you do have nerves, and nerves are always something. And one of the things I do with nerves is there's nervous excitement, and then there's just excitement. And I try to switch it so that my nerves, everybody gets nervous, but I think through it. And instead of being nervous, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you and hopefully give, your listeners something that they can take away and learn and grow from. And so that makes me excited, and it changes my energy when I'm presenting to people.
Absolutely. Are there any other things that you have in terms of your philosophy in life when it comes to leadership? We spoke about, really going for it and shifting your energy for excitement and all that. Is there something that you would say is important in terms of more personality? So not so much about the skills, but really the way you see life, the way you show up for yourself and for others each day as you wake up in the morning. I know we spoke a bit about boundaries and self-care and courage. There's so many directions we can go with, but if you think about 2, 3 that you felt are, those are the important core skills, core philosophies that I have in life that really help me to be aligned with who I am, authentic for myself, but also show up at my best as a leader. What would that be?
Top on that list is be authentic.
Yes.
All times, right? As a leader, you have so many people watching everything you do every single day. How you approach a conversation, how you talk to a team, how you talk to a client who's upset, how do you talk to a client that's really happy, everything that you do, how you are with your kids is being watched. And for me, it's so hard to try to pretend to be something that I'm not, or to pretend I have knowledge in my brain that I actually don't have. So instead, I'm extremely authentic. What you see is what you get, and I hope everybody who knows me would say the same thing, because I don't have agendas. Everything is, everybody's allowed to take a piece of me. And I love taking pieces of other people as well. People who are completely honest and authentic and just know who they are. When you think about mentors or people who've influenced your life, I can truly say that, I don't really have kind of a formal mentor, but what I do know is everybody who I come in contact with, I make sure I leave with something, because everybody has a whole set of knowledge that, if you don't ask, you will never know what's in somebody's mind and in their bodies. And with my team, especially I've asked questions that, are a little bit more personal, only to understand who they are when I'm not with them, when they're not in the office. What makes you tick? What excites you? What makes you different? And so I'm always curious, so probably authentic and then being curious. I'm always curious with people. And I'm always asking the questions, and I'm asking them not because, I feel as a leader, I need to ask those and I need to know this about the people. I truly want to know. I want to truly connect with people on a whole different level, so that they can trust me, so that they know I got your back, and the only way that they know I got your back is if you trust me. And the only way to trust me is by really letting me in. And to let me in, I got to ask, some of those questions. So be authentic, be curious. And number 3 would be always have courage. There are, you said it before, there have been so many instances that, I think, okay, good, check that one off the list because I accomplished that. Now there will be nothing hard, right? Everything is now going to be easy because I feel like I've done everything I possibly can. Not the case. Probably every single week I am presented with something that takes me completely out of my comfort zone, that something that I don't know that I need to make sure that I look into and understand. Yes. And it's always, and you have to be open to that. You have to morph yourself. You can't just be, Shawna Gilbert, the day 1 of, December 23rd of 2017 is not the same Shawna Gilbert that you're seeing right now, March 5th of 2021, especially because we had a year of a pandemic within there.
Yes, is, absolutely.
A whole other podcast of leadership in its own.
Yes, but actually, I think it would be very interesting to go that direction a bit, because I know that you've made a remarkable work with Remax, with the team, with all the people that you have supported. Of course, the headquarters together have supported in this pandemic. And we had a small conversation before that, and I know that you mentioned vulnerability as one of the tools to connect. Would you like to explore that? We were talking about leadership and who do you really open up to? And as pandemic, hit us all with surprise, you managed to really build an intimacy and connection and trust and loyalty within the franchise. Can you tell us about how did that look like?
Yes, gosh. So the global pandemic, is both a blessing and a curse, but I can honestly say, thankfully, personally, my family's healthy and everybody, surrounding my inner circle, we did have some losses, and that's, horrible. And we do hope that, gosh, this thing we can go back to what we consider normal, at some point. But the one thing good that came out of it, I do try to see things for glass half full and not, there's a lot of heavy in that glass half empty conversation, but the glass half full was, as a leader, I had the ability, my leadership style, I'm an extremely empathetic leader. I'm empathetic, I'm sympathetic. I was able to really connect because that's my natural leadership style. Yeah. And so thankfully, that worked. But when you talk about vulnerability, part of that empathetic leadership style is I'm willing to be open and totally vulnerable. Generally, I feel when we talk about our biggest fears, which this pandemic created an incredible fear and anxiety in people in many different ways, physically, emotionally, it definitely took its toll. And so a lot of people, when they talk, they will tell their spouse, or they will tell, they generally tell somebody kind of in a hierarchy of leadership, you'll tell somebody up above you. Like I would talk to my boss about my biggest fears and my anxieties. But it wasn't until I really talked to my team about the things that I was anxious of and that I was fearful of, that we were able to have an open conversation and allow a safe place for people to really talk about that. Yes. And when you get on that level and you can have that true, honest conversation, people don't have to fake how they are or how they're doing. If you're struggling, I need to know, because if you don't tell me and I don't know, you're living the separate life aside. And as a leader, shame on me for not knowing that you are challenged, in the privacy of your own home. I can't physically see you every day, and so we made a very conscious effort not only with the team, but with our network, to be in front of them as constant as we could, so that we could talk, we could be open. I could see you. I feel like I'm very good at reading body language, and I'm very good with tone. And so if I ever started seeing anything that wasn't what I know to be somebody's personality, I jumped on it like that, because it's so important to make sure that, you know, you're vulnerable. And, you know, I think it gets confused because you feel like as a leader, you need to be strong and you need to have this confidence, and you're not fearful of anything, you know, you're going to conquer the world. But everybody has those fears and those anxieties and that weakness. And it doesn't, you don't have to be strong. You can be human, and people still find the value in your leadership when you open up and you are vulnerable and you can talk about it. Because from that, I got strength. I mean, my team knew when we were running this marathon, and I thought, when is this going to be over? And it was May, and didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel. And, you know, people were struggling, and our businesses were, they'd never been through this. So nobody knew what to do. And I, you know, had a moment where my kids were home. I was being a kindergarten teacher. I was, you know, watching them all day while, you know, being on at all times of the day to support the network. And there was a moment where I thought, I don't know if I can do this. You know, I don't know if I have what it takes. I don't know if I'm going to have the courage. But because I was extremely vulnerable, my team picked up on it. And they came to my house and did a drive-by parade with signs that said, thank you. And oh my gosh, you know, it chokes me up just even thinking about it right at this moment. It was just what I needed to go, got it. You know, this is why I do what I do. These are the people that I'm going to do it for. And we're here now, March, you know, of 2021. You know, I made it from May only because they knew, and I was vulnerable enough to kind of open up and show them how challenging it was.
Yes, absolutely. And it's a scary thing to do, because when we open up, I remember when it was in March last year, 2020, and we were in Bali at that moment, supposed to have our third leadership training. We just booked this amazing place, wanted to fly in all these amazing leaders, you know, very excited for the new year, starting off great. And then just like everything just stopped. And all that year we're planned to do lots of events. So, you know, rethinking everything, going back, hoping to get on a flight back to Europe. It wasn't also 100% sure it will get back in time before they close all the borders. I mean, I was going through myself that moment of I have my, you know, my team, my community to lead, but at the same time, like, I cannot just show up and say, hey, everything is perfect, because I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to go back to my country, or I'm going to be stuck on the island, you know? So not knowing what this thing is. And I remember when we just got back to France, and we got back, we to pick up our things back to Europe. And I just landed, and I just felt like my body was shaking. You know, I just like felt that, oh, I really felt I've gone through a lot of things, those moments of getting back. And speaking with our clients, our community about that, and say, hey, listen, I just got back on probably one of the last flights, and I'm feeling this way right now. We can have a conversation, but we have to kind of pause everything right now for maybe 1 or 2 weeks in terms of like normal schedule, because I have to figure this out. And it was the first time I felt that, okay, I have to take myself first and just sit with it and say, okay, it was a traumatic experience for me. I need to check in with myself, get myself back in shape, keep going, but don't pretend that everything is okay, because there's something that has, you know, this is scary. There was fear involved. There were so many, you know, questions at that stage. So I think I can really resonate with what you said with being vulnerable was the most important thing, and probably the scariest thing I could do at that moment. Because why is it scary? It's because there's this idea we have of leadership of you have to always, you know, show up and be happy and encouraging and always, you know, the best energy and like, you know, all this like emotionally stable. And when things happen and it's something extraordinary. It's something that we haven't experienced ever before. Well, we are also human, so we have to go through the process of saying, okay, there's a lot of things to keep in mind. So I love what you're saying about vulnerability, because it's, if for the ones listening and watching this episode, it's so important and it's so scary. It's so scary to say, I'm going to open up and I'm going to say what I'm feeling right now, or, you know, or I'm going to say, listen, guys, I don't know where we're going with this, or we are figuring out, but we don't have the answers, because no one has the answers. To pretend that we have the answers would not be true. And you can just say that I'm going to show up and I'll do the best to lead you. I'm going to be the best to show up for you every day I can. But there is no promise of anything possible of, you know, this is how it's going to look like, because we don't know the roadmap. No one knows the roadmap. And I absolutely love it, because when you open up like that, like you mentioned, your team came to your house and, you know, they drove around the house to thank you for you opening up. And that's what happens. And I cannot, if I relink that to public speaking as well, the moments you open up in your stories, the moments when you really open up in your leadership, in your stories, the scariest thing we can do is to open up. But when we do that, when we start to, you know, take off those shields and all these ideas of what we are supposed to do, because that's how we see leadership, or that's how we see someone being successful or responsible, wherever we put us on ourselves as this weight, and we start to open up, that's when we really step into our leadership. That's when we really step into who we really are and how we are really there to serve. Like you're mentioning, you're empathic, you are great with people. When you connect with them, you're there. That's what they love you so much, because you're really seeing, hey, this something is off. Let's talk about it. Let's fix it. And that's your leadership. And no one else could do the leadership like you are doing. But that is courage. And that is feeling that you're good enough, and that you are enough, and that you are 100% in your position, and you are going through it, and, you know, working through the imposter syndrome. And I love that you're talking about this, because, you know, and no matter what level in your leadership, no matter what, you know, you as a vice president for the 110 countries, or if you're just starting off a leadership, or you're a mid-level leader, doesn't matter. We are all going through that next level of, I have to figure this out. Should I use my hands in the teleprompter? Should I do that? Should I, you know, how is it to, we are all going through a next stage of learning something new. So we are always in that position of just going with our courage, because that's the only thing we have, right? We only have our courage.
Right.
So, yeah.
And something that you said just triggered, and I had to write it down so I didn't forget, because the another super important key of leadership that you have to learn is, you know, I talk about the leader that I am, because
Yes.
I've really become self-aware as to who I am, how I lead. And just because I'm, you know, a naturally empathetic leader, doesn't mean that, you know, the 6, 7, 8 different other styles are wrong, you know, and it's knowing where you are and knowing how that is received, because not everybody on your team, you know, is going to receive the way that I lead in the same way, because they lead differently.
Yes.
And so they have a different expectation. And so it's super important that you become self-aware of who you are, how you lead, how you motivate, how you inspire, what your strengths are, but most important, what your weaknesses are, because that is, they will see those first. And if they see them before you see them, you've just lost an opportunity to be vulnerable and, you know, be able to share that, and to be able to fill your weaknesses with somebody else on your team's strength. I'm the first to say, you know what, I'm not the best at, you know, crunching numbers and putting them into spreadsheets. But I know who exactly is that person.
Yes.
My weakness is somebody else's strength, and I give them the opportunity to shine and be the hero, because I don't need to be the hero for everything. But self-awareness, knowing your weak spots, you know, don't have blind spots. I think they call them blind spots, you know, in terms of somebody else is seeing something that you can't. You don't want to have leadership blind spots, because those will take you down quicker than anything else, is if you are not aware of your shortcomings. And we all have them. Absolutely. Every single one of us has them, you know. And when you were talking about being vulnerable and being able to talk about, you know, if you think of leaders who aren't vulnerable, you know, and who are showing the strong front, and none of this scares them, and you know, they don't even talk about it because it doesn't scare them. It makes you, you know, like myself, who has anxiety and fears and doubts, it makes me question my own feelings. You know, if this person who is a leader who I look up to isn't feeling these feelings I'm feeling, maybe I'm wrong in the way that I'm feeling. And it will make people close up. Yes. and not talk about it. And when that happens, you've lost a huge opportunity of connection, because now they don't see you in the same light. They don't see you as somebody who can help, or somebody that they would be able to talk to, because you couldn't understand what they were going through.
Yes. And then, as you said, they are closing down, and you cannot connect with them. You cannot get through, which is the most important. If you're going to work with the team, with your, you know, with the whole network, it's such an important skill to have, to be able to connect quickly and deeply with the network, because you meet someone, you know, in the conference, or in the convention, or in the office, but you meet so many people, and there's so many key people in the network, and your capacity to connect with them by being vulnerable, by really opening up and listening and seeing what's going on, and connect and being curious about them, is a fast track. It fast tracks your connection. Because if you stay as, you know, the leader who is 100% perfect and has, you know, not showing any emotional, almost like a, you know, like emotionally not connected, right? You will not open up. When something happens, you will not know it. And we need to know that, because there's so much things going on, especially during this pandemic. We want to be able to, on Zoom, getting on the phone, being able to feel like, actually, I can send an email to Shawna and she will respond. And I can be honest about what's happening. I mean, amazing. Right. There's so many, you know, yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to say, you know, one thing about, you know, presenting and being real to people. I have an example of that, you know, being a woman in leadership creates, you know, a whole new set of vulnerabilities and perceptions that you feel like you're always trying to overcome. One of them being, you know, I do cry. I don't cry all the time, you know, but I do cry at pivotal moments. And one pivotal moment, actually twice, it's happened to me twice, is I was doing presentations. One was in Brazil, one was in Lima, Peru. And, you know, going on about, you know, and I thought, you know what, this group of people needs to know who I am. They need to know, you know, the outside of Shawna Gilbert, vice president, who's Shawna Gilbert when she's not vice president. And so I decided to include a picture of my family in my presentation, so that, you know, at least people with young children can understand that, you know, yes, I'm traveling. Yes, I have all these responsibilities, but I am 100% in tune with what's happening at home. And I can be a great mom on top of it to my two kids. I can be a good wife, you know, on top of it as well. And trying to get that connection piece. What I didn't realize is how important that was for me, myself, because the second I turned around to see what slide was on, and it was my family, I lost it. I just like, I choked up. And, you know, it was one of those, gosh, Shawna, you know, you got to get yourself together. You can't cry in front of this group of, you know, 1,000 people here. And, you know, it was one of those like, oh my gosh, you know, give me a minute. And by the time I turned back around to face the audience, there were people crying as well, because that super, super vulnerable moment that was like, oh, of course you're going to cry, you know, in front, you know, of everybody. But that moment connected me so much with the audience and with so many people who go through the same things. You know, it became a message of, she can do it, I can do it too, you know. And I had so many people come to me to tell me their story from that one single moment. And that's when open yourself up to people, because you truly can find the sweet spot in leadership by really being your honest, true, self to everybody. So that's one
Absolutely.
example I can tell you about that
Uh,
specifically.
I mean, and that's the thing, it's family and children and priorities. There's so many people who connect with that, sit in that audience, think about their own children, think about their own husband and wife. And that exactly it. It's a human connection. And first and foremost, leader, we spoke about it in the beginning of our chat. We have many hats, leader, mother, partner, friend. But in the end, human connection is the most, we're all going through emotions. We're all going through life. There are parts of our life that we go through that we can so fast connect with. And children and being in partnerships is one of those, moments that many people are lucky to go through. So of course, if if they see that, they mirror. And that's one of the big components I love to use in public speaking. It's mirroring. If you look at the audience, you just reflect, what do we have in common? And if you start there, your conversation will be completely different. It will no longer be you on the stage. It will be a dialogue, because you will be there connecting with your audience. And instead of having conversation one-on-one, you're just having a conversation 1 to 6,000. It's almost the same, but you are doing the same thing. If we think of public speaking or presentation, any conversation, it's always a dialogue. And that reflection of, okay, this is what we have in common. We are both going through this right now. We are both experiencing that. My role is to help us through as a leader. My role is to, guide us, but I don't have all the answers. My role is to find it out. My role is to, be there and look at what is possible and find the roadmap. But in the end of the day, you're still a human, and you're still, going through all the same emotion as anyone in that audience. And I think it's brilliant that you experience that, because those moments, it's nothing that you can fake. It just comes through you. And those are the key pearls of public speaking. I love those moments because it's the most authentic moments we can think of. And it's nothing that we can, put into a document and say, at that moment, I'm going to stay there. And, it doesn't happen. But that's exactly what people want, because then they say, finally we can really connect, and finally they feel something. And that feeling, that's what we start. We are all emotional beings. I think it's there's a book about it, Descartes' Error, I think it's called, and they talk about we are all emotional beings, but we think we are logical, but we are not. So it's more about, our logic will not make the decisions, it's our emotions. So if we put emotions first and then we put some logic into it, it's going to work out. But many times we think that we have to be so logical as leaders, we actually have to be very emotional. So
right.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's hard, but I can tell you the presentation that I did, they probably don't remember the 5 secrets of networking that I was delivering and giving them, but they do remember that one moment, and they know who Shawna Gilbert is when she's not on that stage. So pivotal moments for sure.
Absolutely. I would like you to ask you a last question, because I know that family is very important for you. And, you have 2 children and 3 dogs, and you mentioned that you had some birds before, you and your husband. So that is a priority that you have. So how do you balance leading, such a big network as a vice president, at the same time being with your family and, being the Shawna that you mentioned before as well?
I threw away the word balance, I think is the way, it's work, life, family, chaos. It's not balance.
Okay.
The second that I was under the understanding, and I knew that it's okay to drop balls, as somebody who has so many balls in the air at all times. I don't need to be all things to my son's school, or I don't need to bake the cakes. I can actually buy the cakes, or, to the team, I can put somebody else in charge when I need, the space to open up for something else. So it really is forgiving myself that I can't do it all. I can't be everything to everybody. But my family comes first. That will never waver. You know, everything that I do puts their priority first. But then once I've checked that box, you know, I know that I have the space and the openness to be able to do everything else. And, you know, we all have 24 hours.
Yes.
We all have the exact same time in the day. I've had to sacrifice a lot of things for myself. You know, I couldn't even tell you what type of hobbies I like to do anymore because I don't have any. They would be my family and my work. But you know, for now, it's all about sacrifices, and there's certain sacrifices that you need to make. You know, working out. You know, I always say I don't have the time, but I could. I just find other things that are more important or more of a priority than the hour at the gym. But, you know, finding what are those 3 things that are your core absolutes. Don't waver on them. You know, make sure you're finding that time and space for them. Get off social. You know, it's really hard to even say that because as social has become so ingrained in what we do and how we work, you know, but putting the barriers of, I'll go on social to post what I need to post and to see what I need to see, but don't get caught up, you know, because those hours that you get caught up in looking at what everybody else is doing, you're taking away from the time that you could be doing one of those top 3 priorities of yourself. So knowing that how many hours you have, split it up, define them, know exactly what you're doing in every, you know, moment of the day and make most use of it. That's the best you can do. Everything else, give yourself the balls that drop, somebody else will pick them up, or you can pick them up later. You're all good. That's how I balance.
I love it. And I think that's great for just to kind of reflect, to sum up, having 3 priorities. For the ones listening, watching, you can just put 3 priorities and say, what is really important for me? And understand that you will sacrifice. And I've heard other leaders talk about sacrificing as something that, yes, you're not going to put everything in, and that's fine. And not thinking that you have to, because if you put focus on this, what matters to me, 1, 2, 3, and it's how I'm going to prioritize that. And then there are going to be moments when you will not do other things. And that doesn't matter. Like you said, there are moments when people can take up and they can do it for you. And I can really relate to that because I became a key account manager when I was 20 for 5 offices, a very young age. When I started working for 17 for a family business, you know, running offices and really being in the entrepreneurial world, and travel and leave my country when I was 21 because I decided to open a language school in France, you know. But I cannot remember how many things I sacrificed. I had to sacrifice not being close to my family, sacrifice how many weddings I missed, how many baptisms I missed. I cannot even think about it because I was speaking somewhere or was doing something else. And I had to give myself the grace and the forgiveness of saying that that's fine because my mission is bigger than that moment. And I love these people and I care about them, but my mission is big and I really want to impact this world. So therefore, there are going to be sacrifices, but of course, there will never going to be a moment when I will forget my 3 priorities. So I can so relate to that because, you know, when you are growing your leadership, you're doing things that are extraordinary, and that it requires you to kind of really switch up your life a bit and redesign it around what really matters to you. It's not the normal, you know, Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 o'clock. It's something that has to be structured around you and your personality and what really matters to you. So I think it's really important to listen to this. When you're listening, watching this, you have to create and you have to decide and make your own choices, what really matters to you. That's what I will really take away from this, you know, non-balanced conversation, because you create your balance, you create your chaos, so you create what really matters. And, you know, you don't have to go to the gym 1 hour per day. You don't have to be on social media, and really be conscious of where am I spending my time? What matters to me? I love this conversation, Shawna. This is so amazing. I would love to wrap up a bit with one small question. If someone is listening, watching this, and they have to take one action to be bold in their leadership, to really step up, what would that action be? If there's a small action they can do today.
Oh, small action. I'm going to do 2. One is the next time an opportunity poses itself, say yes, because many times we say no and convince ourselves otherwise. So that's number one. But number two, really think of what those three priorities are of yours, because they will change. You know, they do modify as you go forward. But right now, what are the three most important things? And make sure that you know that, get rid of the noise and really develop those three things. So those are my two key takeaways
Yes.
from this conversation.
Love it. Thank you so much. And where can people find you, Shawna, if they would love to follow your work closer?
They can find me. You can find me on Facebook, Shawna Gilbert, and you can also find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram. You know, unfortunately, on Instagram, I'm not as savvy. You won't see as much. I'm much more active on Facebook, but you can find me there, and happy to connect and answer any questions that anybody might have.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you so much, Shawna. This has been amazing. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I feel so grateful for all the tips and advice and the inspiration that you brought to our audience. Our big mission with this show is to empower women and men to be bold enough to go for their dreams and be bold enough to share their message and voice. And this episode has brought so much value bombs and tips, and I'm very grateful for you taking this time. Thank you so much, Shawna.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. And be bold. Absolutely. Thank you,
Great.
Daria.
Thank you for the ones listening and watching this podcast and live show. Make sure to subscribe and put the actions under in the comment below so we can see what you have done and taken action on from this episode. Because as you know, it's all about the small tasks, the baby steps towards your goals. It's not so much about just being inspired. It's also about taking those actions, because we want you to dream big, but also be big and go for what you really want in life. So until next time, have a wonderful day and